Hello, good evening, everyone, and it's good to have you back again. I have three eminent experts, professionals in the field of cybersecurity and cyber insurance: Suresh Emanuel, Kaushini Dayawansha, and Dharini Fernando. Thank you for being here. And this is me, Sujit Christy, President ISC2 Colombo Chapter. So today we are going to be talking about cyber insurance. What is it? What is your liability? So starting off the proceedings, Suresh, you can actually tell us, is cyber insurance really necessary? Is it? Suresh.
Yes, thank you, Sujit. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. So, indeed, Sujit, I think it's really important. One of the risk transfer option, when we consider the cyber insurance, right? So, as CISOs of an organization, when we articulate our defensive mechanisms, we generally, set our security in layers. Kind of, we call it a layered approach. Why we set that in layers? Because we have to make sure that if one layer fails, the other layer actually takes over. So starting from your logical controls to your physical controls, then your network level security controls, your endpoint level security controls, and then we keep on adding these layered layers of security. But what's the main purpose? As I said, if one layer fails, the other layer has to take over. So cyber insurance is also considered as one of the critical layer where as part of your business continuity and the cyber resiliency, because if all of these layers fails at some point as a risk transfer option, the cyber insurance will help you to recover in case of a cyber incident or a cyber attack. Because as we all know, the risk cannot be totally eliminated, because when we consider your organization and the cyber strategy based on your top 10 risk of the organization, so we keep on adding security controls starting from your endpoint security to network security, your firewalls, and also following a proper framework like NIST or ISO 27001, adding into best practices and training your users. All of these are really important. But there could be a scenario still you might have to, depending on this transfer option, because no organization is immune to cyber attack. Because of that, you need to have this transfer option in place if there is a situation where all of these layers fails, you might need to have your last resort to to recover yourself. So that's why the cyber insurance is really important, and the coverage part of it. And also by having a better security hygiene and the posture within your organization will help you to negotiate really better cover from the cyber insurance service providers. So I think having a better security is really important, and or no, not only cyber insurance, because the cyber insurance is not the primary thing, as we all agree, but still it is a necessity for the organization, because in case one of these or any of these controls fails, you still have another option, your plan B, as a cyber insurance, where you can quickly recover and resume your operation and support your businesses. So that's how I see this, and I think that set the context for today's conversation.
Very good context, Suresh. Couple of points I picked up. No organization is immune to cyber attacks. And you're also saying, while the organizations had to adopt good security framework, implement good controls, and also look at as a risk transfer mechanism to cater to any eventualities, if there is any. So I think that is what we're trying to understand today. What is this risk transfer? What has the organization got to do in order to be eligible to avail the benefits of this risk transfer? So Dharini, I'd like to bring you in. I think we keep asking this question: what is my liability? Right? Every time we invest in something, there is always a conversation which relates to cost versus the benefit. And most of the time, a conversation relating to insurance, people always think in terms of the likelihood of occurrence. If it happens, yes, we are covered. If it doesn't happen, that money is wasted. Now, in that context is what I would like you and Kaushini to take us through this conversation. What are the terms, right? I mean, especially I'm talking about specific words or terms which people use. First party cover, third party cover. So if you can just quickly walk us through what does first party cover mean to a person who is listening to our conversation right now. Dharini?
Okay, thank you, Sujit, for having me. And what it basically means is generally a cyber insurance policy is structured. It's a tripart structure. Like you said, the first is the first party, and then there's a second party, and then there's what you call a reimbursement element of expenses. So if you take first party basically provides protection to an institution for direct losses or damages incurred, mostly consisting of loss of revenue from a computer network interruption due to hacking, DDoS attack, ransomware, data destruction due to a security failure incident. So first party, basically, if you think of yourself, it's your own company. The loss that occurs to your own company is covered. Where third party, do you want me to just give an idea of what the third party is also? So third party is basically, if you take an institution, let's say a bank, who are their third parties? It could be members of the public, but most prominently, it could be the customers. Customers are considered third parties as third parties for the insurance policy. Then the third element is actually where reimbursements. When there's a security failure or a security situation where you need help, there are like expenses that the policy can cover. Let's say, for example, you need forensic experts, IT forensic experts. You need PR consultants, especially you need lawyers. So that the recovery of expenses will get covered by the component in the policy in that section. So as a standard, any cyber insurance policy will have these three sections. The style might be different, the wording that you use might be different. For example, you might use crisis management to cover all these reimbursement expenses, but then there's another word called event management. Basically, it's more or less the same thing. So if you kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into the policy, you will understand how this kind of, plays out at the time of a loss.
Sure, Dharini. I guess you brought in a very important aspect, event management. Now, typically when you talk about event management, people tend to think it's all about, organizing a party. But here in insurance, it is about an event which is surrounding a crisis.
Yeah.
So when we talk about cybersecurity or cybersecurity framework, we talk about different types of risks, and there are different threat actors. And each of these threat actors can lead to different results, or the actions can manifest in different forms. And one of the examples you brought out at the outset is direct losses to the company. In other words, example of a revenue loss. Then you also spoke about the third party, and we also spoke about the reimbursements and things like that. So, Kaushini, bringing you in, what more do you think should we be looking at in the first party cover?
You mean what the first party cover entails? Is that what's the question?
Yes. You gave us examples, right? You talked about direct revenue loss, And then you talked about, so when you talk about the direct revenue loss, is there anything else we would look at, or would the first party cover anything else?
Yeah, the main component of the first party cover would be the network interruption losses. That is the downtime.
Okay.
That could be
Right.
due to security failure. It could be due to the security failure of your outsourced service provider. Then it could also be the network interruption for system failure. Now, when you say system failure, it is something which is unintended, unintentional, and it's purely accidental. So in the policy for the first party, infrastructure breakdowns like the telcos and the Ceylon Electricity Board, those things are not covered. Something which is purely unintended kind of a breakdown, that would be covered. Then also
Right.
the same would apply for your outsourced service providers also. So that is the main, actually, the cover that it'll cover under this particular section.
Right. So I'd like to bring Kaushini in, right? I hope you heard what Dharini was saying. Kaushini, is your
Yes.
line stable? Yeah, all right, great. Okay, so we've been talking about the first party, right? And it all relates to direct losses or revenue loss. The recent times, right? The last 2 to 3 weeks, most Sri Lankan companies experienced an outage due to a specific cloud service provider. And it did impact impacted a lot of their customers. Now, given a situation like that, now not many of them in Sri Lanka would have had a cybersecurity policy. So what would you advise those companies who have not taken a policy? What should they be doing? 1, 2, 3. Can you just walk us through, Kaushini?
Okay. I will not put my on my video because I have some disturbance in signals are dropping. So
Sure, no
coming
worries.
back to your question, Sujit, now in that particular instance, company A, the cloud provider, there is obvious business interruption for him until he sorted out. So first of all, he has to find out whether this pertains to a cyber attack or not. In case if he needs to get the coverage, suppose we have a hypothesis, we assume that he is covered by a cyber insurance policy. So the first thing which he needs to find out is whether there is a cyber attack, and also there will also be a waiting period. So that waiting period is for his first party cover to find out, to see whether it could fit into the business interruption. So say for example, in his policy, if the waiting period is 12 hours, then after 12 hours, and if they have found out that the cause of this interruption is due to a cyber attack, their cyber insurance policy will start triggering. That is for the cloud company. And for the other companies who have received the service of the cloud provider, there is a liability. The liability is for the third party where their services have been interrupted. So there is a financial loss component for these clients of the cloud provider, where they can also claim for liability, which will fall under the third party coverage of the cloud company's cyber insurance policy. Sujit?
Right. Yeah, got it. I got it. Right. So I'm just going to stay with you and then probably bring Dharini in to add more comments to this particular question. Dharini, you did mention there are certain aspects, especially if it is due to electricity outage, that there may not be a cover. But my question is related to electricity. let's assume that there is a surge, right? It's a short circuit, something to do with electric panels, and it fails, and thereby the companies are forced to shut down their systems. The cloud service companies are forced to shut down their systems in order to salvage their infrastructure. Thereby, it impacts the customers. You see, in this context, it would work.
So we are talking about an entity who has a third-party cloud service provider. Is it?
Yeah. So the cloud service provider has a power outage. And because of the power outage, they are forced to shut down their systems and thereby depriving the customers to continue their operations.
Okay, so the cloud provider's power outage, is it due to infrastructure failure or something?
It's an infrastructure failure. It's a technical failure. There is a surge.
Infrastructure failure would be where the service provider of the electricity is unable to provide. So
no, the supply, yeah. So this is how it is. There is a surge, and the consumer is the cloud service provider. Their systems now starts to fail because there is a surge. There's a fluctuation, power fluctuation, let's say.
Okay, so this is where one of those areas where investigation will be required. Then we'll have to determine. So that's this is where your the forensics experts will be required. So if there is if there is a problem in finding out whether this is actually infrastructure failure or something to do with the cloud provider, then that will have to be determined first. And also the other thing is, if you're an entity having a third-party cloud service provider, it's for your benefit. Now I'm speaking on behalf of the institution which has taken these services from the cloud third-party cloud service provider. The entity will have to check whether those guys have insurance or not, the cyber insurance or not. So it depends on a number of variables where you have to check. So if they don't have, then at the time of taking the policy, you have to declare that you're using this particular service provider. Then there's a chance, yes, it will, if it's not infrastructure failure and you have agreed with the insurance and the reinsurance company that you are using and they have accepted it, yes, it will most likely be covered. But there are a few things which will have to be investigated, whether it's actually unintended system kind of, failure due to some internal thing, or it's something to do with the, the authority that is giving the service, like Ceylon Electricity Board. So there are these are areas which you will need expert services. So that's why sometimes the cyber insurance policy limits get burned up. That's a technical thing that we, say the limits get, quickly burned up, simply because these kind of, services might not be in this country. You might have to get specialists down from somewhere else. And for these expenses, the policy will cover. But there are like a couple of things which we will have to check whether it is actually covered or not. So sometimes an incident, a certain portion of the incident might be covered, but not the other. So there are like quite a few things to kind of, investigate in this situation.
Yeah. Sujit,
go ahead, Suresh.
So I would like to add a few things into that particular questions, and Dharini, you can correct me if I'm wrong on certain thing. So based on my understanding of that particular questions, a genuine system failure is not generally considered as a cyber attack. So generally, cyber attacks are purely focused from a cyber insurance related kind of covers. So the specific scenario which you brought up should be addressed contractual wise to the organization based on the SLAs and service providers and the uptime guaranteed by the cloud service provider. and certain certifications they have. If they fail to comply with that particular contract or honor that contract, based on that, that's what based on my opinion. But if that interruption is due to a cyber attack to the cloud service provider, then again, as customers we get impacted. Then for the cloud service provider, we are a third party liability. And if they have a cyber insurance, then they can claim against that cyber insurance to, compensate us as a third party customer. Otherwise, they have to bear in, we need to basically stick into the contractual framework, what we have agreed when we establish our services. So
Yes,
that's what my understanding, but probably Dharini can add a few more points.
Yes, you are right. So, so at the time of, so let's say ABC company, so they have a cloud service provider. Okay, so there is obviously an agreement between ABC company and the cloud service provider. So a couple of things will go into underwriting that. The insurer would like to see, sometimes they would like to see this agreement, what special type of conditions that are there between the company and the MSP, right? Yeah, the managed service provider. So it's not a direct yes and no, because at least one particular policy that we work with, it says interrupted a network interruption due to system failure, and it goes to define as interrupted from an internal system failure, not from cybersecurity breach. These are unintentional and unplanned outage of a computer system. So that is covered. And the other thing is the insurer has to specifically say that this type of product, this type of coverage is provided. Okay. So for network interruption, there are 4 areas. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get the cover from the insurer. There will be what we call underwriting, and the security failure plus the system failure can be added if the insurer accepts that. So I know this is a little bit of a complicated area, but it can be
No,
extended.
it's interesting. It's interesting in the sense. Why I say interesting is this actually will take us to have more detailed discussion in the future episodes, right?
Yes,
so,
because
so
you
we
will also
be...
sometimes the insurer will tell ABC company, okay, we are not going to cover your outsourced service provider of, the clouds provider. They will have to get their own insurance for whatever reason. Yeah. Especially if it's
Kaushini,
and Kaushini might be able to add more to it, because from a legal angle, actually.
Yes.
And also, like sometimes with this network interruption, if the insurance company is willing, they can also add to the voluntary shutdown as well.
Yeah.
So Kaushini, I'm going to stay with you. I have a question, right? I mean, stemming from what both Suresh and Dharini said. Suresh specifically mentioned it's all based on SLAs. Now, your service provider or my client service provider can dispute, saying, okay, you guys have not provided the service as per the agreement. Now it becomes a dispute. So there is a cost which is to cover the legal cost. So if, let's say, we need to engage a law firm or even to initiate an investigation, how do you cover those costs? Are those covered in the first party cover in general?
It is covered. Yep. Go ahead, Dharini.
Go ahead. Sorry, Kaushik.
Yeah, it is like if say for example the defense costs are covered against the third party cover under the third party coverage. If there is like say for example, now irrespective of the SLS, it needs to come under the coverage of cyber insurance. So as long as it is under the cyber insurance, then the defense cost or the getting a counsel to represent you to defend yourself will be covered.
All right.
And also,
So
Sujit, the insurance
yes,
or the reinsurance company has to accept that arrangement, the main, the whatever
right.
the contract, yeah. So provided that is accepted initially by, at the inception of the cover, then yes, obviously, like Kaushini said, the cost will get reimbursed. But
Right.
this is quite a complicated area, so there are like many elements that you have to look into, especially when it comes to third-party agreements.
Absolutely. And I'm going to even make it more complex now, right? Now, we talked about cyber incident and a non-cyber incident. How do you establish that? Any one of you can answer this question, right? I mean, this is a common dilemma, right? Somebody might say, hey, it's nothing to do with cyber. It's power. Power just shut off by itself, and the systems went out of order. Or there was a surge and there was a meltdown. So there could be a cyber attack as well on the power grids.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Kaushini,
I would
yes, go
ask
ahead.
this question, Sujit. Now,
Yep.
suppose if the business interruption or the network interruption is due to, let's say, a security failure, it is much related to cyber incident.
Right.
But if it is due to a system failure, then it could be due to outage of a service. So whether this is covered under your policy or not will depend on the coverage agreed with the insurance company. For example,
Right.
I have seen in certain policies, the insurance company will give the security failures, but not the system failures or the voluntary shutdown. So in such instance, if they find out, if the finding goes on to establish that the business interrupt or the network interruption is purely due to a system failure and there is no cyber attack involved or a security failure, then the policy may say deny the claim. But if the policy coverage is to cover your system failure as well, or the outsourced service provider system failure in the second instance, where the cloud companies clients have got affected, and if the situation is due to a outage of a service, then the cyber policy would trigger.
And sometimes to actually understand what has happened, let's say a company has not been given the system failure coverage, and then how do you understand which has taken place? Is it like a cybersecurity failure or attack, or is it like a outage? Then obviously investigations will be required to to determine. If it's not very obvious, there'll be specialists who will be attending to this to figure out, like any other insurance claim actually. Sometimes you wonder, when accidents happen, to see whether it's a genuine claim or not. Who will decide? We will get a report from an assessor or an engineer. So same way, if there is any kind of doubt as to what has happened, there will be a investigation done. And
sure.
Yeah, Dharini, just to further understand on what you said, in case if the scenario is a vandalism, somebody purposefully doing a damage, or maybe an insider, right? Then again it's covered as part of the insurance, but not from the cyber insurance, I guess. It's totally different insurance.
If it's something like a crime kind of thing, right? You're referring
for
to?
Example, something happened in Sri Lanka, the medical records got deleted.
Yes. Okay.
Purposefully somebody damaging the systems.
Yes.
That's so. It's again a security threat when we consider the CI aspect. Its availability is jeopardized, but again it's a purposeful one, but not an incident. Somebody insider might be doing it with purpose to probably to take harm the organization on a maybe for a different cause, maybe for personal reasons, or maybe somebody have instructed with some rewards to do it. So that has really happened in the organizations, right? So there are real world cases in Sri Lanka as well. So if that happens, is that a cyber attack? What you suggest it's because somebody not externally involving it directly, whereas somebody hacking into your network and coming and disrupting your databases, whereas somebody inside doing it. So I think it's covered as part of insurance, but not from the cyber insurance. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, if it's like genuine negligence, generally it will be covered. But if it's intentional, malicious, fraud related, then it's not covered. But there is another element. If your third parties are affected by it, let's say your customers are affected by it, then irrespective whether the employee was malicious or not, you will still owe duty of care to a third party. So from my understanding, that aspect will be covered, a customer suing that particular company. But any internal own damage or first loss damages will not be covered, because it's a inside person, an employee doing something maliciously. Kaushini, from a legal perspective, you might be able to give some insight into it.
Yes, Dharini, because many of our cyber insurance policies will have an exclusion called conduct, which will exclude that any willful or any dishonest, fraudulent, criminal, reckless or malicious act, error or omission, or any intentional or knowingly violation of law. If it is committed by a director or an employee, then it will not be covered under the policy. However, as you correctly mentioned, the defense cost is available, because this lies under the principle of presumption of innocence, where there is a rebuttable presumption. Until proven guilty, you are presumed to be innocent. And also, if there is a liability which occurs due to this, it could also be captured under the third party liability section.
So
however, your first party will not be covered.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Kind of very deep stuff now at the moment, actually. A
Yeah,
more complicated area. We have got into the complicated areas like
Absolutely. So I guess that set the stage for us to understand at the outset the different terms, what gets covered as first party, what gets covered as third party, what are exclusion, what comes as part of conduct, what are intentional, what are unintentional. And I think that kind of sets a stage for us to take the discussion forward into another session. So since we are running out of time today, so I would like to quickly ask you to say it in 30 seconds, your closing thoughts on first party. One point which you would want the audience to take back home and probably reflect on it. So we'll start with Dharini, Suresh, and then Kaushini.
Okay, I would say with regard to cyber insurance, talk to somebody who will understand the policy before before actually purchasing it, because otherwise, if you don't understand it, you might be in for surprises. So as much as it covers a great extent of your damages, there's also certain aspects that you have to understand before purchasing the cover.
Sure. Suresh?
Yeah, so my perspective, I think as a CISO of a bank and, to represent the business for the moment, what I would think is to, you should not, end up in a situation where there's incident have occurred and you end up in a situation where the claim is not covered due to, your understanding of the claim is not the same as the insurer's understanding of the claim. So I would suggest to, always when you try to procure cyber insurance, seek the expert advice, make sure in black and white, you have the 100% idea of what is covered and what is not covered. That will make sure to, clear all ambiguities in terms of a cyber attack or any incident, if you come across in future, you are well aware of whether you are covered or not, because otherwise you will end up in a disappointment where you will not further trust on a cyber insurance in future. So that will impact your perspective, might impact the other industry as a ripple effect. We talked about ripple effect in the last event. So similarly, something could happen. I would suggest to, make sure you know in black and white what you are purchasing and what is covered and what is not covered.
Kaushini?
Yes, I also believe that when you are purchasing a cyber insurance cover, always like demarcate what you really look into. Because sometimes I have seen certain clients, they are really interested over covering their third party exposure, whereas some parties are concerned over covering their first party exposure. So as Suresh correctly mentioned, as Dharini said, so before you purchase, you need to establish what exactly you want, and then start a discussion so that you know that your expectation is met with the insurance coverage provided, so that there won't be any surprises. And always divulge all the information you have. Tell the insurance company the claim scenarios, whatever the scenarios you have come across. And also sometimes there may be any gaps which you will want to take a closer look in the future. Inform the insurance company, so they will always have a proper risk understanding when they underwrite your cyber insurance policy, and therefore you will always have a coverage when you're desperate.
So I guess my takeaway is that always consult an expert. Get a deeper understanding of what the policy covers, what the exclusions are, so that there are no surprises. And last but not the least, I guess the organizations should understand or come up with the scenarios for the cover. Do you want to do a first party cover or third party cover? And it is very important because today most organizations are in the process of a digital transformation where they're probably moving from an on-site data center to a cloud environment. So where is your end goal? What is your end goal? And then start looking at where you want to take cover. So when we come back the next time, we're going to be talking about a couple more scenarios. We would be talking about social engineering and fraudulent transaction. We'd be talking about digital extortion, ransomware. And then we would also, very specifically in all these scenarios, we would focus our attention on computing the lost business income. Today's conversation, we started with loss of revenue. And how do we determine that loss of revenue so that you can qualify for a claim? So we have a lot of points to discuss in the future episodes. So if you do have any of your questions which you want the experts to answer for you, you can send a mail to me. You can look me up on LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm available on both the social media platforms, or you can send an email, president@ISC2 Colombo Chapter.com. So with that note, I want to thank Dharini, Suresh, Kaushini for your time, for your valuable knowledge sharing, which you have selflessly given for all these sessions. And I sincerely appreciate it, and my board appreciates that too. And we've been receiving good feedback about our sessions, and I'm sure the audience will keep sending their questions to me. So I'll put them together and come back to you and ask a set of new questions when we meet next time again. So with that note, thank you so much again and have a great day. And signing off for today, Sujit Christy. Bye-bye.